Police in Hong Kong have fired tear gas at protesters trying to stop a controversial proposed law that would allow extradition to mainland China. Now, the city's legislative council has postponed a planned debate on the law after crowds blocked access to government buildings. Hong Kong officials have ordered the demonstrators to disperse, but they say they are defending the territory's freedom.
From peaceful protest to violent chaos. Umbrellas become shields and weapons as demonstrators try to fend off rubber bullets and tear gas fired by the police. Tens of thousands of people came out to rally again today in protest against Hong Kong's controversial extradition bill. A quiet march until tempers flared. Mostly dressed in black, their faces covered with surgical masks and wearing makeshift body armor. From the get-go, some in today's crowd seemed ready for a different kind of protest than the largely peaceful mass demonstrations on Sunday.
I would say actually if we arm a protest, or we do like some more into a different way, into a more violent way, that's the only way that the government would be like having our concern.
They are worried about a proposed law that would mean Hong Kong could send people to mainland China to face trial. Critics warned that would allow Beijing to target political opponents in Hong Kong, which retained its own justice system after being returned to China from British rule in 1997. Undeterred by the outrage, the territory's chief executive is promising to push forward with the legislation.
I have not received any instruction or mandate from Beijing to do this bill. We were doing it, and we are still doing it, out of our clear conscience and our commitment to Hong Kong.
A commitment hardly reflected today at the Legislative Council, where seats remained empty as the scheduled debate was postponed. But with a legislature dominated by Beijing loyalists, few protesters expect the law to fail the vote on June 20th.
Honestly, I'm quite disappointed, and I don't think they will listen to the people and they will still go ahead, but I think they will pay for it.
They may have forced the legislators to delay the vote, but for these protesters, the struggle to preserve Hong Kong's autonomy has only just begun.
Earlier, I spoke to DW's Matthias in Hong Kong and asked him about the clashes between protesters and police.
Police have massively used tear gas to disperse the protests and to cordon off the area around Lechko and the government buildings. They are trying to drive out the protesters. On this side of the city, this has worked. There are no more protesters around here. They wanted these protesters out. They wanted to end these protests. Now, whether this would put an end to the protests, I doubt it. People are really angry here.
And it seems momentum is growing, Matthias. Now, this extradition bill debate in the Legislative Council, it has been delayed. What does that actually mean? Is it a victory for the protests or really just a delay?
Well, during the day, people had the feeling it was a small victory, but nobody had the illusion that the government would back down or reconsider this bill, that they would have really achieved something. It was a small, punctual victory by blocking off the Legislative Council and blocking the discussion inside, so the lawmakers could not come inside. The government is determined to push this through against probably a majority of Hong Kongers. We have seen the largest demonstration in 30 years on Sunday. A big part of society is roughly against this bill. This did not have any impression on the government, so probably today's protests will neither have.
That was Matthias speaking to us there. And we have DW reporter Cherry Chan with us. She's from Hong Kong and has also been following this story for us. Cherry, thanks for joining us. Why are we seeing such an outcry on the streets of Hong Kong?
Yeah, so basically, Hong Kong currently doesn't have any extradition arrangement with China. And with this amendment of the new law, it means that extraditions of suspects, it's allowed to go to China, and then many critics fear that it would mean they lose the freedom of speech, and it would mean that Yeah.
That they would lose the freedom of speech. So they're worried about China's control in Hong Kong. They have their own judicial system. They think this is going to affect that. We are seeing such a large number of people on the streets. And we should say that Hong Kong also saw huge pro-democracy protests 5 years ago. That was the umbrella movement. How are these protests different?
So in 2014, when there was an umbrella movement, you really see a very clear generational divide. By then, mainly young people and students would go out to protest, and you will also hear a lot of debates and discussions between young people and their parents. And they said there would be a lot of arguments. And basically, the older generation, they didn't support that protest. But then this time, in this protest, the goal is really clear. And it's also really clear that the whole society is supporting this protest, and they just don't want this law to pass. And so you really see that the society is united. And the second difference is also that in 2014, people went on the street and they think that their action would make some changes, and they would hope that the government would listen to them and change their mind. But then this time, many people actually didn't think about what they could do. They just said that they want to do something that they think is right, regardless of if there's results or not.
So they don't believe that they can actually change this law?
Yeah, many people try not to ask this question. They just want to go out and have their voice heard.
Tell us more about how Hong Kong has changed over the last few years.
Yeah, so as I said, because in 2014, not many concrete outcomes have been achieved. And so after that, some people really feel a bit hopeless, and that you feel this atmosphere of like losing hope and people being apolitical and trying not to intervene in politics so much, and they discuss less about this. And actually, this protest with 1 million people coming out to the streets, it almost feels like there is a rebirth. It feels like they are reborn, and there's hope again.
All right, really interesting. Cherry Chan, our reporter, thank you so much for your insights.